The storm rolled down from the mountains like it had teeth. Wind clawed at the trees, bending them low, and snow swallowed the narrow road leading to Caleb Ward's cabin. He lived where the world went quiet on purpose, a place people passed on maps without noticing. After 20 years in the military, quiet was the only thing that helped him sleep. Inside, the fire cracked low. His old German Shepherd, Ranger, lay near the door, head on his paws, eyes half closed but never truly resting. Ranger had been his partner overseas, trained to detect danger before it breathed too loud. Retirement hadn't changed that. The barking started all at once. Ranger exploded to his feet, nails scraping wood, deep barks firing from his chest like alarm bells. Not the warning bark for deer. Not the irritated bark for wind. This was sharp. Urgent. Wrong. Caleb was already moving. Boots. Coat. Flashlight. Hand on the door. When he opened it, the storm punched inward, snow spiraling through the doorway. Ranger pushed past him onto the porch, barking into the white blur. Then Caleb saw it. A wheelchair sat crooked at the edge of the porch, half buried. A woman was strapped into it with rope gone stiff from ice. Her head slumped forward, hair frozen to her cheeks. Silver duct tape covered her mouth. Snow clung to her lashes. Her hands were bare, purple with cold. She hadn't rolled there. She'd been left. Caleb's chest tightened with a memory he never escaped. Arriving too late, someone reaching, breath fading into silence. Not again. He crossed the porch in 3 strides and pulled the tape free. The woman gasped like the air hurt. Please, she rasped. My daughter, they took my daughter. Ranger stopped barking and stood pressed against her knee, tail low, eyes locked on her face. Not suspicion. Recognition. Caleb cut the ropes, lifted her gently, and carried her inside while the storm swallowed the tracks outside. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know who had done this. But as Ranger planted himself at the door like a sentry, Caleb felt the shift deep in his bones. The quiet life he built was over. And the night was just beginning. Caleb laid the woman on a blanket near the fire, moving with the steady control of someone trained to work through panic. Ranger stayed close, not touching her, but near enough that his warmth reached her shaking legs. Up close, Caleb saw she was younger than he first thought, maybe early 30s, her face pale beneath windburn, freckles faint across her nose. Fear had settled deep in her eyes, but it wasn't wild. It was focused. He handed her warm water first, then soup once her hands could hold the bowl. She drank carefully like someone used to rationing comfort. My name is Leah, she said, voice rough. They said if I went to the police I'd never see her again. Who? Caleb asked. My daughter. Emma. She's 8. The words landed heavy. Ranger's ears twitched at the change in Leah's breathing. Caleb noticed. What happened? He asked. Leah looked toward the dark window before answering. My ex runs transport routes through the mountains. Not legal ones. I kept the books. I found something I wasn't supposed to. Money tied to weapons. She swallowed. I copied the files. Insurance. And he found out, Caleb said. She nodded. I left that night. Wheelchair makes people underestimate me. I can stand a little on good days. Not far. They caught me before I reached the highway. Caleb glanced at the chair. One wheel bent inward. Frame twisted. Deliberate damage. They took Emma yesterday, Leah whispered. Left me as a warning. Said the cold would finish what they started if I didn't give back the drive. Ranger moved then, gently nosing the pocket of Leah's coat. She froze. Slowly she pulled out a small pink glove. Emma's, she said, breaking for the first time. I kept it. Ranger inhaled deeply, then looked at Caleb. Alert. Certain. Set. Proof of life. Caleb felt the old switch flip inside him, the one he buried with his uniform. This wasn't about revenge. It was about time. Cold. Distance. Where would he take her? Caleb asked. Leah closed her eyes, picturing maps only she could see. There's an old ranger station past Miller's Ridge. No power. No patrols. He used it before. Wind slammed the cabin walls. Caleb stood, already reaching for his pack. Ranger was at the door before him. Somewhere in the storm, a little girl was waiting. And Caleb intended to bring her home. They left before dawn, when the storm still raged hard enough to hide movement. Caleb pulled a sled behind him with supplies and blankets while Ranger ranged ahead, nose low, cutting through drifting snow like a shadow with teeth. Leah stayed behind at the cabin, wrapped in quilts, radio in hand, repeating directions through chattering breaths. Miller's Ridge rose like a frozen wave against the sky, trees bent and crusted in white. Caleb moved without hurry, reading the land the way he once read streets in foreign cities. Broken twigs. A boot print half filled with snow. A place where someone had slipped and cursed under their breath. Ranger paused suddenly, tail stiff. He lowered his nose to a scrap of fabric snagged on bark, pink wool small. "Emma." "Good boy," Caleb murmured. The trail led downhill toward a shallow valley where an old ranger station sagged under the weight of winter. One window showed faint light. Generator maybe. Or lantern. Caleb dropped low, scanning. No vehicles. No patrol tracks circling wide. Overconfident. Through a gap in warped boards he saw her. Emma sat on a cot, knees pulled to her chest, oversized coat swallowing her frame. Duct tape lay discarded beside her, she'd worked it loose. Brave. Watching the door, not crying. Two men played cards at a table near a propane heater, rifles leaning within reach. Caleb exhaled slow. Ranger looked up at him, waiting for the silent command. "Quiet," Caleb whispered. They circled wide. The wind covered small sounds, but wood floors didn't forgive mistakes. Caleb slipped inside through a rear service door hanging loose on one hinge. Ranger followed, placing each paw with care learned long ago. One man laughed at a joke that didn't matter. The other reached for a drink. Caleb moved. 3 silent steps. One precise strike to the first man's throat. Ranger lunged low, jaws locking on the second man's forearm before he could shout. A muffled crash. A choked gasp. Then stillness. Emma stared, eyes wide but dry. Caleb knelt. "Hey kiddo. Your mom sent me." She searched his face, then Ranger's, and nodded. Trust transferred instantly. Behind them, wind rattled the walls trying to get in. But for the first time since the storm began, someone inside was finally safe. The return through the storm felt longer, though the path was the same. Emma rode bundled in blankets on the sled while Ranger trotted beside her, close enough that his fur brushed her mittened hand. She kept one fist curled in his coat the whole way, as if letting go might make everything disappear again. Caleb moved behind them, scanning the trees, every sense stretched wide. Twice he thought he heard engines far off, but the wind swallowed the sound before it could become real. By the time the cabin lights appeared through the snow, his legs burned and his breath came hard, but he didn't slow. Leah was already outside. She stood braced against the doorframe, one hand gripping the wood, the other pressed over her mouth as if holding in a scream. When she saw the sled, she stumbled forward, pain forgotten, boots sliding in snow. "Emma?" The girl twisted around at the sound and launched herself off the sled before Caleb could stop her. She ran the few steps on shaky legs and crashed into her mother's arms. Leah dropped to her knees in the snow, holding her daughter so tight it looked like she was trying to fuse them back into one person. Ranger stood guard beside them, chest out, ears high, watching the dark tree line. Caleb turned at the distant growl of engines, real this time. Headlights broke through the storm moments later. Sheriff deputies, called by the emergency signal Leah had sent once Caleb left. The 2 men from the ranger station were taken away silent and bleeding, faces gray with shock. Evidence would do the rest. Inside the cabin, warmth returned slowly. Emma refused to sit anywhere but the floor beside Ranger, fingers buried in his fur. Leah met Caleb's eyes across the room, gratitude too heavy for words. "You didn't have to," she said finally. Caleb shrugged lightly. "Yeah," he replied. "I did." Later, when the storm finally passed, dawn spilled gold across the snow. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. Ranger rested his head on Caleb's boot, eyes half closed. This time they hadn't been too late. And that changed everything.